Everybody, welcome to Screen Time Movies and TV Reviews. I'm Brandon,
I'm Travis.
and today we're watching Hostiles from 2017, written for the screen and directed by Scott E. Cooper, based on the story by Donald E. Stewart, starring Christian Bale and Rosamund Pike. It is a revisionist Western movie, and it's pretty heavy. It's a brutal movie. What do you say we jump right into it, Travis?
Let's do it. So Christian Bale plays a U.S. Army captain, and he has to escort Wes Studi, who plays Chief Yellowhawk. Kind of, you can tell in the movie early on that they were enemies, and we'll dive into that as well. But he has to escort Chief Yellowhawk, who is dying of cancer, back to his homeland.
The
And of
Valley of
course,
the
it
Bears.
never goes as easy as originally planned. And
No.
first scene, Brandon, starts off with an absolute bang.
So quiet day on the Quaid home front as
Yes.
the man's out working, building his, putting together the homestead, the farm, working on their property, and wife and the children are doing their schoolwork, learning. It's just like, honestly, like looking at this movie, the whole thing was beautiful. Like right away, I'm like watching him build that house and stuff, and I'm thinking that looks great. That looks excellent. I would love that life, like just out in the middle of nowhere, beautiful country. Got your wife and your kids. But
Agreed.
but there,
The scenery was really nice. Everything looked really good. And like you said, I'm a sucker for those Western kind of movies.
Well,
Maybe
that
later down
era.
the line we'll review Django
Right.
Unchained, and I love that movie. And I kind of got that same feel when I watched that first scene. But Rosamund Pike, who plays Rosalie Quaid, is in her house teaching her kids some like vocabulary. All of a sudden, the husband runs in, and it's like it's on from there. He's
Get the girls
panicking
go.
when an enemy tribe is rushing their house with guns and shooting. They're shooting back and forth.
So
It's like,
to me, it's that there's two sides to that story. Yes, it looks great living out in the country, all isolated like that, back in the good old days. But those were brutal times, and that's a big thing that this movie is about. It was just the kind of life that these people lived. I mean, we like living today. I mean, it's couldn't be better. We have every comfort you can imagine. It's just life is so simple. I'm in air conditioning right now. I think about that a lot as I watch these movies.
yeah.
But just how uncomfortable life would have been then. But I guess it's just all you knew, so it would be fine. But yeah, so as peaceful as it was, it's also very, very brutal. And before we know it, there is a Comanche raid on the Quaid homestead, and just brutal from the beginning. Wesley gets mowed down in seconds. The Rosalie and the girls tear out back behind the house, but I mean, you got a whole posse of Comanche riding up on you on horses. You're not getting away, and they don't really. The two young girls iced immediately. Rosalie does escape off into the woods, but along the way she does take a bullet. You're not really sure. You're actually hoping that it was her that got hit, because the alternative is it's the baby she's holding as she runs into the woods, and you're thinking like, are we going that dark? Is this that dark? And the answer is yes, we're going that dark. But so she scurries off into the woods and finds refuge behind a tree, just gets
that's
quiet.
A good point about her. Like, you kind of hope that she gets shot, not in a bad way, but you're like, well, shit, it's a baby that got shot. And like her two other daughters are dead, and her husband's dead, and she's kind of left on her own. And all of a sudden, it kind of goes from that scene where she's running away and she's hiding. She does hide successfully. Obviously, she lasted the whole movie. But it immediately cuts to the scene where, Christian Bale is at a table having a discussion and having a drink with one of his
not quite. There's a scene before that where it is Christian Bale and his crew of people roughing up some Apache.
That's right.
And so like immediately you see that like the Indians were brutal, but you also see that the army is, they're not good either. And that's why, I mean, this is a revisionist Western thing. It doesn't follow the traditional white hat, black hat Western where there's a good guy and a bad guy. Although, I mean, we do have our, sort of villains throughout the movie, but it's not as cut and dry as like the typical spaghetti westerns, or the just that whole trope of the white hat, black hat thing. So you see that there's some darkness to Christian Bale and his crew as well. And then after that scene, so they are capturing. Well, they're in New Mexico, all right. And New Mexico is not even a state at this point. We should mention that the movie does take place in 1892, so it's towards the end of the American Indian Wars, which lasted like 300 years or something like that. So it's we're already towards the end of it. There's been a lot of history there, but they are Christian Bale and his group. I believe they're Apaches that they have. They bring them to Fort Barringer in New Mexico, and that's where it's obviously like there's a prison there and everything, and then so they bring their prisoners, drop them off, and then we get this scene where Christian Bale and Metz, who a great character, are hanging out in the in that room where Christian Bale is reading. And I do got to figure out what that book is and what he was, that's.
Yeah, Sergeant Metz, who was played by Rory Cochrane, which Brandon, you recognized immediately.
Yeah, well, actually, not immediately. It wasn't because this is how good of an actor Rory Cochrane is. I mean,
yeah,
I am a fan of his in the work that he's done. I know him from a few movies, but it wasn't until I was really looking at the IMDb cast list where I was like, wait, that's Rory Cochrane. That's Slater from Dazed and Confused. Like check you later. And he's also in Empire Records, which is a great movie. I love that flick. But so he's a very versatile actor. He looks nothing like either of those characters. He's very gruff, has a big beard, and he is down. He's talking that he's just getting tired. And you can tell that both of these guys, Blocker and Metz, have seen some shit. They've done the war thing for quite some time. Metz is all bummed out. They took his guns. I don't know really why. I think, or who did, but he just references they took my guns, and he's talking about having the melancholia, which I love. Christian Bale has a great line there where he's like, there's no such thing.
No, you don't. You don't.
No, you don't. Yeah, buck up, Metz.
Yeah, exactly. When you told me that after watching the movie, I was like, oh, man, it makes so much sense. But, I mean, when you watch it, it's kind of like, yeah, he's an older man now. He's all gruffed up, and he's playing this soldier. But it's a really telling scene because it might not seem like a really impactful scene at the beginning. But then towards the movie, as it rolls on, you realize that scene told a lot.
Well, and it had one of my favorite lines in the movie, which it's a weird one, but it's where Metz asked, is talking to Blocker, and he's like, "Do you remember the time?" And he just starts. I believe he's talking about Wounded Knee, and he goes into like what they did there and how what like kind of a brutal battle that was. And they both are remembering those times as like they were the good old days. Like they even like kind of say that like those were the good old days.
And, yeah, and obviously Bale's character Joseph Blocker starts like laughing, like they're talking about. Remember when you killed that guy? Whatever. They go into the story, and he's like laughing about it. It's like,
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's that scene kind of sets up the fact that you can tell like these guys are experienced veteran soldiers at this point. They've been in the war for a while. You can tell
they're good friends.
They've seen battle together. They've that they have a bond that is the strongest in the movie, as far as I could tell, like with the characters. Although when we get into Woodson, there was an emotional scene with him as well. But you could tell that Blocker and Metz were boys for sure. Yeah, so for sure. That scene just basically kind of setting up their relationship. And then we cut to Colonel Abraham Biggs. And this is where Blocker gets the mission that he does not want. He's pretty much done. You can tell like they're all like have had enough of this, and like the war's over. They want to stop fighting, and but there's still bad blood on both sides because Blocker is given the job to escort a former, straight up enemy of his, and he gets into it. He has receipts of like friends of his that Yellow Hawk has killed, but so he gets this job to escort the Cheyenne chief Yellow Hawk back to his homeland. He's a prisoner and stuff, but he's old now and he's dying of cancer.
Yeah, well, the colonel's basically like, look, he's basically almost done for. Let him go back to his homeland and basically die. Where
it's a good gesture. It was a completely political kind of thing. They talk about Washington in this scene and that this is under orders from the president. And the way that he gets Blocker's attention is because Blocker was like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to walk out this door, just totally turning down the job. But he's like, well, you care about your pension, don't you? You know, there's not a whole lot for an old captain to do but whittle and whistle and wait for his pension check. You know, so he's got Blocker by the nuts. You know, like you're doing this.
Yeah, and you know what? That was the first scene. We all know Christian Bale is an amazing actor, but that was the first scene where you can see Christian Bale's like intensity come through, where he's like, I can't remember the name of the other character in the room, but he was kind of laughing and smirking at, Christian Bale's past, Joseph Blocker's past, and he was kind of like, don't you
laugh. Like, he's like, you know nothing about war.
Like
yeah. And,
you know, exactly.
Because you could tell like this guy, he's like a politician dude or whatever. I think there's later when they're on that scene, when they're about to head out, there's a cameraman who takes a picture of him. And I thought that might've been the same guy too, but I was like, why would the cameraman be in like the, colonel's office yelling at,
exactly.
Who knows? So but that other guy in the office, is a total dick, like knows nothing of war and is kind of laughing at the whole thing. And but again, Christian Bale, they got him, so he's gonna have to do this. He knows he's got to do it. Before they do though, he goes and he visits Yellowhawk real quick. No dialogue again. There's a lot of scenes in this movie with no dialogue, where it is like a visual, just kind of exchanges or scenery, stuff like that. But so he goes and he checks out Yellowhawk, sees him sitting in his cell, clearly, old, obviously dying of cancer or whatever. And he just you can see Christian Bale struggling with the realization that he's going to have to do this. So,
well, we talked about this too right after we watched the movie, and it was kind of an impactful scene early on where after kind of having that silent scene with Chief Yellowhawk, he goes outside and he just has this moment where it was completely quiet, if I remember right, where he's just screaming like, oh, like
there's that he does a big scream where the scream is inaudible. There's the great soundtrack and stuff they're playing, but this was actually the scene that got my attention, that made me want to watch this movie. I remember, it was before it came out, but I saw it, a trailer, and the visuals of it, just like the clouds in the sky, like the kind of the color scheme of the movie or whatever, it caught my attention. It made me interested, and I wanted to see the movie. And I never really did get around to doing it until you brought up doing this movie for our first episode of Screen Time, and it was like, yes, I've been looking for an excuse or a reason to watch that movie because of that scene. So when that scene came up, there was a payoff for me, just because it was what I remembered, and it kind of caught my eye. So you see Christian Bale, just kind of the internal struggle and what he's got to do. So he's going to do it, and then we cut to the next day. We meet the crew. Blocker comes walking out, and the first thing that I noticed was that he was holding a revolver and a belt, like an ammo belt, and he walks up and he hands that to Metz right away, and he's like, "Here you go, buddy. I got your guns back." And again, like I said, I don't know why they took him in the first place or what the whole deal was with that, but Metz has his guns back and he's ready to roll with his buddy Blocker. And so that was just a kind of a quick, just kind of reconnecting with Metz. And then we meet Henry Woodson, who is, you can also tell that there's some history there. You don't really know how deep it is until later in the movie, but it's kind of like a ready to go captain, I'm here for you.
Yep. Yeah. In this scene, Blocker meets his, for lack of a better term, crew. The journey they're about to partake in. And it was, he kind of goes down the line, and my favorite, and I can't remember his name, but my favorite was down the line was the French character, where he was just so out of place, and Christian Bale's
Philippe Desjardins.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it was. Yeah,
so exactly. And that was an interesting one too. So, before we meet him too, we meet Lieutenant Rudy Kidder, who you also find out is from West Point. And I laughed, like, for what's his name? I think it's the guy who he reminds me of Matt Damon for some reason.
Yeah, Jesse Plemons, who I first saw in Breaking Bad. So it's like, oh, Jesse Plemons when I first saw him. But yeah, he did a good job in this movie too. But yeah, you said that. Yeah, you'll take Matt Damon a bit.
I'm not sure. Was Jesse Plemons that guy, or was he the who played the Wills, the prisoner that they?
Wills was Ben Foster.
Okay, So I don't know any of those guys. I still haven't watched Breaking Bad, so maybe that's something we could do for screen time. It would be an excuse or a reason for me to watch Breaking Bad. But yeah, so we meet Rudy Kidder, and then we meet Private Philippe Desjardins, the French character who is Canadian, I think probably. But we meet him, and the first thing I thought, and it was you could tell he's timid. He's the youngest of the group, clearly. But my initial thought was red shirt. I was like, this dude's toast early in the movie. I don't have a lot to complain about with this movie. I enjoyed it for the most part, but that was one of my criticisms. Would be a lot of it was kind of predictable to me. There was stuff that I was like, all right, here now this is going to happen, and then that happened. But so we meet Private Philippe Desjardins, and then Blocker gets the most worthless piece of thing in the movie, the papers, the little here's your papers, like these will guarantee a safe passage all the way to Montana to the Valley of the Bears, where you got to go to bring,
which we'll discuss later on in the movie.
But that was again like right away. No, right when he handed it to him, the papers to him, I was like, oh, good, those papers. I immediately was just thinking about life then and living like that, and just you're gonna ride up into some people's deal like, oh, I got a letter from the president. Oh, I don't know, so right away I was like, oh, those papers are worthless. I can just tell, and so we got our crew. We got Metz, Woodson, Kidder, Philippe Desjardins, and then we got our prisoners as well. But it's a time to roll. So they
and then also in that scene as they're kind of getting going, Chief Yellowhawk is just like, hey, can you maybe, or no, this is before that. He actually gets off his horse. Christian Bale tells him to get off his horse. Blocker does. And he's like, hey, I'm putting you in cuffs. Immediately, like, has no trust. Like, you can tell right away. It's like, it's strictly.
The colonel had them all dressed. He's like, we cleaned them up for you. Got them in like normal kind of clothes and all, so they don't like look like prisoners. You could tell like Blocker wasn't happy about that, because he's like, no, this dude is a prisoner and he killed a bunch of my friends, because again he named them earlier, so he's like, get off your horse. He challenges them first. I don't know if that's what he wanted when he was trying to hand him a knife, and like they were gonna have a beat it style knife fight. But Chief Yellowhawk tells him, he's like, I'm not afraid to die, and like death doesn't scare me or whatever. And Blocker just sort of gives up, and he's like, all right, well, take that crap off of him and put him back in chains, and gets him back into like kind of prisoner status. I believe they do too, aren't they? No, so like we got Chief Yellowhawk, Blackhawk, his son, Elk Woman is the son's wife, and then Living Woman is his sister, Blackhawk's sister.
Right.
So we got the 4 prisoners and our ragtag group of United States Army guys, and now we're on the road.
And the grandson as well.
Little Bear.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, Little Bear. That's right. Yep. Yeah, they got the whole group there. They got the whole family, and you can tell Christian Bale does not like Blocker. Does not like any of them. That's for sure. Well, then they go and the group then sets up camp. The following day, they see the. After they set up camp.
Hold on, before we get to that, I forgot one line that was my favorite kind of in that scene.
Sure.
Was when they're rolling, Blocker stops everybody, on their horses, and he's like, all right, fucking parade's over, and hops off his horse, and that's when like he's like, no, we're not, take that crap off of him, put him in chains. We're not playing this game. We got our stupid photo op, but and he also, I think, knows, like this journey that they're about to go on is a rough one. He also knows that Yellowhawk is could be anyway a threat to him also. So first night's quiet, right? They set up camp. Woodson treats them to a little bit of a tune. He's singing around the campfire. But so quiet first night, and they wake up the next day and head on back about their way, which brings them upon the Quaid homestead. And
they walk upon the burning house, or the burnt down house that's still kind of held up, and they walk in, and Christian Bale's kind of tentative at first because he sees that Rosalie Quaid, Rosamund Pike's character, is in there, and he doesn't know who he knows somebody's in the house, but he doesn't know who.
And he comes in gun drawn, ready for whatever,
Yep.
And yeah, there she is sitting, singing to her baby while the girls are, right away, isn't her first thing is like, shh, they're
Yeah, she doesn't
sleeping.
want to.
The
Yeah,
kids are
exactly.
sleeping.
Which at that point, which is funny, I was like, wait, is the baby actually alive then? And I was, nope, it's not. She was just kind
No,
of,
she is holding a
going through it.
blood-soaked blanket, and the
Yeah.
two daughters are on the bed with, just covered with a blanket, and you can
Yep.
tell like she's sitting there with her dead family. Wesley's still out on the front though, with arrows in him, laying there where he fell when the Comanche took him over. But so Blocker and the boys find Rosalie in a, obviously like almost catatonic state. She's pretty much unresponsive, just shush, the kids are sleeping type of a thing. And Blocker gets her out of the house, and they start to kind of comfort her, and they go on about their plan. All right, what are we going to do here? What do we just kind of stumbled upon a woman,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, that has lost everything. And they grab shovels, and they go to start digging some graves for her family.
Well, and the big thing too is when they bring her back to camp, obviously,
Oh
and
yeah,
the one scene that kind of stuck out in the beginning also was she sees Chief Yellowhawk and his family, and she like screams like, "Oh shit!" Like, but Christian Bale, Joseph
they
Blocker
can't hurt
is
you.
just
They're
like,
not going to
"Hey,
hurt you.
they're
It's
not gonna
okay.
hurt you. You're just fine." Then they go and they start, like you said, digging the graves for her
Well, she
children.
says, drop those shovels. She's not going to let them dig those graves. She's like, I will bury my family. And
Yep.
she goes and starts clawing at the earth with her bare hands, which that was another like sort of powerful scene to me, because again, like just the setup of her, you can tell. I mean, she's again like lost it all, her family and her mind a bit, and she just starts tearing at the earth. It's a really ineffective way to bury bodies, and eventually she grabs a shovel, but eventually taps out of that, and the guys Woodson and Kidder finish kind of digging the graves for her. But so they bury Rosalie's family, and yeah, she's well, and they're thinking, what do we do now? What are we going to do with her? What's the plan here?
Right. Right. Yeah. They obviously they have to bring her into camp at that point, and yeah, that's pretty much all they can do. And one of the first things that as she gets into camp and kind of settles in, she does. It takes a while for her to really settle in, but the tribe, Yellowhawk's family, offers her a dress as sort of like a peace offering. Like, hey, we're not part of the the bad tribe. We're peaceful and we want to get along here and stuff like that. So that was kind of a big thing that was the first step of her starting to get entrenched into that camp and everything kind of going in full motion.
Back to, yeah, like just sort of her back on the
Yep.
rails for sure, because that's again, like I said, she lost everything. The only thing that she had, as far as I could tell, that she really kind of took with her was her husband's hat. Blocker grabs that at one point and hands it to her, and she puts it on. So she basically leaves her home, her family behind with nothing but her husband's hat. And yes, Black Hawk, Elk Woman, Little Bear, and Living Woman give a gift to the lady of some clothes. And we also get a scene of Metz and Blocker talking about how like she's broken Joe, and Joe's like, yeah, she is, and what are we going to do with her? Their plan is to take her to Winslow, which is kind of their next stop along the way. But that night, then too, Rosalie again, she's lost. She grabs. I can't remember whose gun she grabbed. She grabbed someone's gun though, and
Yeah,
goes up to
everybody was
the
sleeping. I
graves.
think she just saw one in a jacket and she just grabbed it out of the pocket and then she just went towards the grave sites.
It might have been Blocker's gun, even. I
It
don't
might
know.
have been, yeah.
And she goes up to the grave sites, but he's on it. He hears her going, and he follows her out there. And she never even picks it up and puts it like to her head. You can tell that that's what she was planning to do. But she goes out there, and she ends up spending the night on the ground next to those graves. And that's just that, and then they wake up the next morning and get on the horses. They have a little last service, kind of some parting words or whatnot. There's that long kind of scene again, kind of lingering on her, sort of looking at the graves, and then it's
Yeah,
time to go.
it's time to go, and then it kind of cuts to, you go from that scene into the scene where they're all kind of, spread out around the area, and Christian Bale's kind of over the mountain ledge, and Yellowhawk and Blackhawk come up to him, and they're like, "Hey, can we, can you please unchain us, in case
You're
that
gonna need
there's
our
any
help.
enemy tribes coming, like the tribe that tried to kill
Well, and
Ray's
he's
family."
yeah, the Comanche, and he's got a great line too, where he's like, they're rattlesnake people, the worst kind, is what Yellowhawk's saying to blockers. So they're aware of the threat that they face, and yeah, with Yellowhawk is old, sure, but he could still be useful in battle, and Blackhawk's like in his prime. So he's like, we'd be better off if we're all kind of in this together. Remove the binds, we can help. And Blocker says no, to which Yellowhawk says, "You're making this more difficult than necessary." And he was right, because shortly after that, I mean, it doesn't take long, the Comanche attack. And again, their first attack was brutal. This one's brutal as well. Felipe, the red shirt, the Canadian, boom, just gone right away.
Shocker.
He's like,
The first one to die.
Didn't bring much to the table as by way of helping. But Yellowhawk, I love this. He jumps in he tramples one of those Comanche with his horse. He uses his horse as a weapon. And he gets that look. He looks at Blocker, and Blocker like, you could tell he was kind of saying, like, I told you, you're gonna need our help. And now I'm
Blocker,
left using a horse as a weapon. I could do even more if you would take off these chains. But
I like the scene too where Blackhawk uses his chains and just chokes that dude out, and it was pretty.
He also
intense
Blackhawk gets into the action as well. So they do have a little bit of a skirmish there with the Comanche. Felipe dead. Woodson gets wounded. He gets shot. I can't remember if it was through the back or through the chest, but he's got a pretty bad wound. Not dead though. He's still with us. But eventually they chase off a couple of the Comanche, but they did get a couple of them. And one of the ones they got was the dude who followed Rosalie into the woods, I believe. And she recognized him. It was definitely one of their crew, because she recognized those guys from the attack on her family. And she grabs a gun, heads over, and just unloads on his already dead body. But
literally unloads to the point where there's no bullets left in the gun.
She's clicking through.
Yeah.
And, kind of getting, I guess, a little closure. There's no coming back from losing your entire family. But she does get a little bit of revenge by way of unloading on one of the bad guys. So.
Well, yeah, and it goes into that next big scene where Yellowhawk is like, "All right, dude, are you gonna finally uncuff me so I can help in case this happens again? I mean, I was able to help you this time, but if you don't uncuff me for next time, it could be bad news." And
he says, "We must
Bale,
stand as one, or they will kill us."
Yes, exactly. And then this time, Joseph Blocker reluctantly is like, "All right, I guess you kind of have a point, seeing as though you helped us without using your hands last time. We could use it this time." So
another great line there too. He's Kidder, unchain him. They put a foot wrong. You put a bullet in him. So he's like, yeah, he gives in to unchain him, but they are gonna. We're watching, and they step out of line, just put him down. So we now do have no chains on our prisoners, and they've already proven themselves to be useful by way of getting creative, using their horse and the chains themselves to fight with. So then we got a great scene with Rosalie and Blocker, where they're sitting talking, and she asks him, "Do you believe in the Lord, Joseph?" And he says, "Yes, I do, Mrs. Quaid, but he's been blind to what's going on out here for a long time now." So you can just tell that he is a man of faith, but again, like we have already learned through the movie, he's seen tough times, and this whole era is brutal. This land is brutal, and she says, "I see that, but I have to believe that it's in times like these that strengthen our bond with him. If I did not have faith, what would I have?" So that was you see that she is a strong character in the movie, and she does prove that throughout it. But she was broken in the beginning. She's kind of finding her strength again and coming back. So I like that scene though between them. And then
I
the
wrote that
next
down too. Oh, go ahead.
that, you go for it because I was going to move on after that.
I wrote down that scene because it was kind of one of those scenes where it might be one that's overlooked, but it is important because her and Bale for the first time in this film have a real, not intense scene together, but a real meaningful scene together. Where she says like, "Hey, if I didn't have the Lord to have faith in, I wouldn't have anything else." And Joseph Blocker kind of gets that point, understands that, and he's a little.
Well, and it
You can
was,
tell
I
like
think,
he's.
like it was like their first real exchange. Like because like before that, I think she was all very, kind of in her own head, and like there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. So when she even asked him that question, like, "Do you believe in the Lord?" It was like a an opening up on her part and his, and like kind of their first real conversation. So it was
Yeah.
an important, I think, kind of point. Next, like we go, we're back on the road and we're on the move. And one of the things that always sticks out to me in movies is like sound design and stuff. And it was when they're kind of going through like the canyon and the river. There's that like a specific kind of a particular sound that you hear in movies. Sometimes you'll hear it in like I don't like alien movies or big monster movies, where it's just like a like this weird sort of
Yeah.
drony noise. But I always like that. But so like it's like the canyon sounds stuck out to me, and it's getting dark. Again, the movie is pretty dark, and there's the like it's a lot of blues, a lot of grays. Like just in the color scheme. But so it's nighttime falls, and Kidder is doing night watch until Metz comes up and relieves him, and is like, you can take off. I got this. And they have a little discussion. You find out like Kidder has never killed a man before. This was his first time when they got into that little scramble earlier on. And you find out Metz has you've already assumed kind of just
Killed
from what but
everybody.
men, women, children. He goes
Yeah.
through down the whole list. He was 14 when he took his first life. So and he talks about that you kind of get used to it. You get numb. You don't really feel anything, but you never get used to losing men. And I've lost a lot of men, he says.
Yeah, and it seems like Kidder's kind of looking at him like, "Oh man, I'm not ready for that." You know what I mean? He's kind of like almost awestruck right there, thinking like, I mean, I don't want to be like that, but
Well, he
he's kind of
says, I
entering
think,
into.
yeah, that's the line. He's like, that's what I'm afraid of, kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
You never you get used to it. He's like, that's what I'm
Right.
afraid of, but you never get
Yeah.
used to losing men. So, Kidder takes off, and Metz takes night watch, or so we think, anyway. Because as we wake up the next morning and we kind of get on our way, shortly down the road, we come upon some Comanche hanging from a tree, and some dead Indians. That Christian Bale or Blocker immediately knows what happened, and
Yeah.
he tells everybody to kind of keep moving, and he stops Metz, and he's like, what's his line? He says, "I do not like being humiliated. You ever fall
Yeah.
asleep on watch again, and it'll be you hanging from a tree." So he knows that Metz was a little loose on his night watch, and he let the Comanche go out, and they took care of a little business. And in his defense, Metz goes, "Everyone deserves their kill, Joe, even them." So
Yeah.
Metz did. He fell asleep on night watch. Our prisoners broke out, went iced a couple Comanche, and then came back. So like that was sort of a testament too to that. They're not trying to escape. They're not trying to mess with Blocker and those guys at all. They're just really trying to get home to the Valley of the Bears. That's all they want to do, is get to their homeland. But along the way, they took care of a little business.
Yeah, and Rosalie Quaid has this part in the scene where she rides her horse past the tribe member who was hanging, and she kind of, for the first time on her face, it was not sadness, it wasn't anything, it was the blank stare, like almost like good.
Yeah,
You
and
know, and it's like,
Blocker
oh,
gives
that's
like
pretty
kind of a
young.
groan while she's doing it. She goes up and
Yeah,
yeah, is just kind of staring at him, and he's like, ugh, like because it's
yeah,
death is gross. There's a body hanging, baking in the sun, like
yep,
yeah, not a pretty sight. But she does go and she takes a look because again, these were the people that killed her husband and 3 children. So
yes,
that then brings us to Fort Winslow. It's our first real stop along the way, and we meet Colonel Ross McGowan, and he asks Joe, he's like tells Joe like I hope you haven't been finding any trouble, or says something about trouble, and Blocker's got the line where he says trouble's been trailing us since we left Fort Behringer.
yeah,
Blocker is no fool. He knows what's going on. He knows that
right.
it's could be a one-way ticket, kind of a suicide mission type of deal. This is brutal country, and
Well, and they go into Winslow to do two things basically. Which Winslow's in Colorado. They do two things there. They want to get rid of Corporal Henry Woodson just to get him on because he got shot in the shoulder
right, he
in
needs
one of the
medical
scenes where
attention.
exactly needs medical attention. And Bale Joseph Blocker's is kind of like, all right, maybe we should get rid of Rosalie Quaid. Maybe she shouldn't be with us anymore, especially as it continues to get dangerous and dangerous. So,
Well, right, and she isn't a soldier. She's not along
no,
on this journey. They happened upon her. Yeah, so like that's the first kind of spot where we could set her up. They can take care of her. She can wait for a coach to get here, and she can go to Chicago or wherever, go to the city, and we'll drop her off and we'll be on our way. So they stop and they have dinner with Ross McGowan and his wife, and his wife, Mrs. McGowan, is a champion of the oppressed. He says she's going off about how the treatment of the natives and how it's bad, and like they're people, they deserve everything, like equality and all that kind of stuff.
sure.
So which is kind of funny, which I mean, because obviously yes, that's true, but as she's talking about all that stuff, across from the table is a woman whose family was just brutally murdered by a bunch of savages, to use
Right.
their term. And so like it's kind of like could be a tough sell for somebody who just went through something like that. And you can see there's a point where Rosalie gets all kind of choked up and she starts to say something, but she never finishes. And Blocker kind of jumps in and he's like, hey, you guys think you could take care of her for a while until like the coach comes and stuff, and they agree. They say yeah, she is welcome to stay here and to chill out, and they finish up, they wrap. Yeah,
A really important scene because I mean, Rosalie Quaid basically is like no, like at the end
you
of it,
can
she's like,
see
no,
it.
I'm
You can kind of tell that
yeah, yeah, and
she's
she
not
ends up
home
going back.
there.
No, she ends up going back with Blocker and his men.
Right, but so
But
after dinner though, after dinner we dip off with where it's just the men got to go and do a little talking.
Right, that's the second. That's what I was going to get to. The second point. The other big part of that scene is when they pick up Ben Foster's character Wills, and that just adds another cog into the wheel, which really adds to the story, in my opinion.
Right. So Ross McGowan tells Blocker, he's like, "Look, I'll take your lady off your hands, but I got a favor to ask you as well. I got a prisoner that needs to be brought to where does he got to go? I can't even remember, but so he needs to go to Fort Pierce. I got a prisoner that needs to go to Fort Pierce, and Blocker out. He's like, well, what'd he do? And he's like, yeah, murder. He chopped up a whole hostile family with an axe. That's where we get the title of the movie, The Hostile Family with an Axe. So now we're not just carrying 5 prisoners now, right? We got a whole group of prisoners. We just picked up some excess baggage. So he
and the
agrees
thing
to
is
it.
too with Blocker, obviously him and Yellowhawk have history. Him and Wills obviously have history because they worked together. He was a former sergeant, and I mean, it's kind of Blocker is just kind of in a tough position.
Yeah, you can tell that they have a history. They don't really acknowledge it right away, but they do give like kind of a nod to each other, to where you're like,
right,
okay, they know each other. You can tell there's a history there. And I like, there was a great line from Ross McGowan where he tells Blocker, he's like, I wouldn't want you, to carrying that kind of a burden. And Blocker says, Ross, I've been carrying that kind of a burden for some time now. So like,
dude, the way he delivered that line is just why Christian Bale is so fucking good.
You
in
forget
acting.
that he's British, right? I mean, like he's another
I
one of
know.
those actors where like he really does turn into the role that he's playing, where so
Yeah.
much that you forget who like the real guy is. But so yeah, great deliveries on all his stuff. I am a fan of Christian Bale's acting chops. But so he agrees to escort another prisoner because he's what's one more? I've already been carrying that kind of a burden. Go ahead. And I think at this point too, he doesn't even know who he is yet when he accepts that deal. But
oh, you know what? That's a good point because he didn't bring up the name at the. Yeah, that's a good point.
At least not on camera. But then the next morning, Blocker goes and he says goodbye to Woodson. That's where so they have their little moment because Woodson's in the infirmary. He's all banged up from being shot and tells Blocker that he feels like he's letting him down. Like he was in for the long haul and doesn't want to leave the group, but he can't help any with the way that he is. And Blocker tells him, he's like, you never let me down, Henry. And they have a very emotional kind of back and forth where that's the whole kind of just it lasts for it's like Woodson saying, oh, I feel like I let you down, and Blocker saying, you never let me down, not once, Henry, but for 2 minutes. Like if you just extend those two conversations, talking points for like.
Well, we watched the movie twice. Obviously, the first time just to take it all in, the second time to go through and take some notes. But after the first time I saw, him get dropped off at Fort Winslow and them having that scene together, it was like, wow, I thought that Woodson and Blocker were gonna like be together the whole movie. I thought he was gonna be his right hand man. Besides Metz, like pretty much the whole.
Well, that's
movie,
where you find out that Woodson is kind of like another Metz. He is that.
Yeah.
Like, they're that tight.
I thought he was gonna be one of those guys where he's there till the end of the movie, but nope. I mean, but that scene was really good though, and also during that scene too as well. A little before that, they show Yellowhawk in the cell at Fort Winslow, and you can start to see that
he's coughing,
he's really getting sick. Yeah, for sure.
The first time you really kind of see the sickness on him as well. Mm-hmm. So. So then that next morning, Woodson and Blocker say their goodbyes, and now they're about ready to take off. They got their new prisoner, or they're about to kind of get him. But Rosalie, this is where she makes the decision. She comes out as Joe's about to get on his horse, and she says, I know I'm an inconvenience, but I'd rather be with you than just about anybody right now, which is understandable because of what they've been through. And she's lost everything. She knows him more than anybody else pretty much at this point. It's like seconds more than like the other guys in their crew, but yeah, they got the longest history and she feels safest with him. So he has Kidder saddle up a horse for the woman and she's joining the crew. She also got some normal clothes and stuff. So she gives her the clothes back to Elk Woman and Little Bear and thanks them for lending her the clothes, and they tell her that you honor by wearing it, and they have that little sort of kind of moment again, just another kind of building that relationship. And we meet Sergeant Malloy. He's kind of the prison escort, right? He's coming along with Wills, who is the prisoner that they're taking. And this is another one that for some reason he stood out to me right away. The way he was standing when they introduced him, like I didn't really know what it was until later when I realized who he was and kind of made the realization that he's not a real like serious good actor like all these other people who like become the character they are. But we meet Sergeant Malloy, and that is played by Ryan Bingham, who is a musician, singer, songwriter. He did like the music for Crazy Horse and or Crazy, what is it? Yeah, Crazy Heart. Crazy Horse is another Indian warrior that is a big monument for. But yeah, so we meet Sergeant Malloy, and I could just, he plays a small role. So, and he also provides some music later on, and that's why they cast him. Completely was for that scene around the campfire where he would sing a song, and so a pretty one-dimensional kind of character. But right away, just as he was standing there, I was like, he doesn't fit for some reason. And then I later kind of realized why. And then we also meet Corporal Tommy Thomas, who is also joining the crew. And he tells Blocker, it's an honor to meet you, sir. So you can kind of tell that like Blocker has a reputation. He's known, he's a decorated captain. So his reputation precedes him, and Thomas is honored to meet him. And then we get our prisoner, Philip Wills, and that's where we see this sort of nod between Wills and Blocker. No, ensuring us that there's some history there too. We don't know exactly what, but they clearly have a connection.
I wasn't sure of whether it was a good idea or not to bring that character in kind of this late in the movie. We're about an hour and a half into the movie almost, but I did like the addition of the character. I think Ben Foster's a really good actor too, and I think the character kind of added dimension to the story where you can really, I mean, obviously, what you talked about, Yellowhawk and Blocker have a lot of history. We have Wills coming in, who has a lot of history with Blocker. We're not too sure, like you said, exactly the extent of the history, but to add that dynamic, like everything's piling on Blocker. And I think, like I said, at first I was kind of skeptical of bringing in a character that late, but it worked for sure, I thought.
It did, but this was another one of those things where it was sort of one of the pieces falling into place of the stuff that I had kind of predicted earlier. So kind of at this point in the movie, it was obvious to me. I was like, man, we're really making a villain out of these Indian people, though. And like,
yeah,
that's not okay in today's world, in current year,
yeah,
you can't have this like heavy slant against like the savage Indians being our villain in the movie. We need more than that. We need a white man to hate and to be angry at. Introduce
even
Philip Wills. So like I kind of knew right away. I was like, well, this isn't gonna go well. But they do. Wills and Blocker do a little talking. They have a kind of at a water break while they're on the road and in this beautiful pine forest. Again, a lot of great just a lot of different kind of geography settings in the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But so we're like in a pine wood forest at like a stream, a nice babbling brook, having a little water break, and they start talking where they confirm this relationship, and they fought together at Wounded Knee. And one of the things Wills is really he mentions, he's like, I was relieved when I saw it was you who was escorting me. He's like, I am I thought my luck was changing. My luck did change, right, Joe? And Joe doesn't really give him a straight answer, but they start talking about Wounded Knee, and you can tell Wills is really sort of painting the picture of like, dude, I know, and I know what you've done and how we did it then. And he tells him, it was like watching you work the Lakota, cutting them up and just brutalizing these people. So again, they just sort of a testament to the fact that was a brutal time, a very ugly kind of war.
Yeah, no doubt. And I kind of when we're at that camp too, and this leads into something very important down the line. But they're at the camp and they can see that it's going to rain soon. So Bale and Yellowhawk, about an hour and a half or so into the movie, for the first real time, Bale and him are kind of like being really cordial, and he's like, "Hey, we should probably go. The rain's going to come." And Bale kind of gives him the old, "Do you know what this is?" If you're gonna look at the
that
well,
move.
he kind of gave him the old almost like a shovel pass formation, but no, but yeah, he kind of gave him that little like, and for the first time in the movie, about an hour and a half in, Bale and Blocker and Yellowhawk kind of have a moment where they're both not only being cordial but kind of being like friendly a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we kind of glossed over the fact that the reason why Blocker was chosen for this mission is, one, he knows the trails and the way to get to the Valley of the Bears, but also he speaks the language and he knows the customs and stuff. So they are able to compete. And I like listening to Christian Bale speak in that dialect. Like the it's all very like calm and stuff. Like he's just a great delivery. But so and before that, when Wills and Christian Bale are talking, Wills does make the point. It could just as easily be you sitting here in these chains. But Bale,
and it never seems like Bale really doesn't. He doesn't really deny that. Blocker doesn't.
No, but he does say, he's like, but I was just doing my job. He knows like what he did was bad, but he was doing his job. And with Wills, he just massacred a hostile family, they called him, but still it wasn't like within the kind of the rules of war or whatever, I guess.
Right,
but,
right.
They that Wills, he, it was more to that than that to him. And that's what Blocker asked him, like what got into you, which that's another one that kind of comes around later where Wills kind of asked Blocker the same question. But so you can tell that the Blocker is kind of moving. He, like you said, he does know that he's done some brutal stuff in the past, but he was just doing his job for one. And then he's obviously not just hacking up people now. He's traveling peacefully with a native family, so things have changed. But they have dinner that night. Yeah.
You can tell that everything that Wills is saying to Blocker is definitely not only like we kind of talked about where he kind of acknowledges that, I guess he's kind of right to some extent, but he can tell just looking at the character's eyes, Blocker's eyes, and kind of his the way he looks, what he's doing, he kind of seems like this is starting to weigh him down. You know what I mean? Like the realization, like, shit, I have done a lot of bad things.
It takes a toll on his soul. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Yes.
And then we also found out that Yellowhawk was also there at Wounded Knee with the Wills mentions that he was there too. And he killed a bunch of like our friends and stuff. And to see you riding with you're bringing me in chains to the gallows, but you're going to set him free. It's kind of weird, Joe.
Yeah.
But again, Joe is just doing his job. That pension is everything that he's worked for, and he's gonna get it. So then they settle down for some dinner. They have their food, and everybody's kind of getting along. With the exception of we have a man chained to a tree, and but we're hanging out. And after dinner, Rosalie makes the point that she's gonna go help. She's gonna help pitch in, doing some dishes down by the river. And that's when we get Malloy starts singing us a little song, and everybody's just hanging out by the fire, just chilling. Well, Little Bear, I believe, Elk Woman, and Rosalie. I can't remember if it was Elk Woman or Living Woman, but they go down to the river to be washing the dishes. And wouldn't you know it, here comes a couple fur trappers. 3 of them come up, and they grab him. Little Bear gets away. He goes running, and he alerts the group. They got the ladies, and our crew kind of gives chase and goes after him. And right away, with the tracking skills and stuff, you can tell there's 3 trappers. They went this way, and they come upon a camp. I don't know how long in between there, because it seems that the women have been worked over by this point. When we reach the fur traders camp, the women have been tuned up pretty good, and we see that they're down there, and we're sneaking up on their deal. And
they kind of stake it out, and they wait for the right moment. And the badass scene from Yellowhawk, or the badass quote. Well, him and Bale are kind of go back and forth, and Bale's like, "No, it's my call."
He's like, "You're old and dying. Yeah, you're not going to help me. Just stay here."
But he's like, "No, my family. I'm doing this. I'm leading this." And Bale's like,
I lead.
"Okay, I'm not fighting back." Yeah.
Yeah, he let him take the lead, and they go down and quietly kind of hop into the fur traders' tents, and just an off-screen kind of melee. You just see the tents shuffling around, and you hear the sounds of a close range, hand-to-hand kind of combat, a struggle, if you will. And, it lasts what felt like kind of a long time. Those 3 guys put up a fight, but in the end, our guys walk out, with the exception of Malloy. Now, this was a scene that kind of stuck out to me too, because I still kind of have a sort of a suspicion that, I don't know if I'm right though, and I don't think we ever really get closure on it, but my thought is that Blocker killed Malloy, and that's because, and I may be completely off here, but he was buddies with Wills. Blocker and Malloy was one of the guys kind of escorting him and stuff. So and the reason why I think that is, when they're struggling at the very end, there's kind of a loud, pronounced sort of knife sound, and Blocker comes walking out of the tent, and right away he's like, "Malloy died." Just kind of the first words, and then it's really kind of there's a lot of emphasis on that knife and the blood on it, as he's kind of wiping it off while he's kind of saying that line. And I thought it's something that's possible, that
It's a really good question because I think he actually might be onto something there.
And then was he maybe going to take out Tommy Thomas later on, and and then Wills would be free?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe he just hated Malloy's music around the fire. I don't know, but so it's possible maybe that Blocker kills.
Guy won't fucking stop. Just taps like, oh,
okay,
he's dead.
One more song.
I don't know what happened to him.
But so we rescue Elk Woman and Rosalie from the traders. So now Rosalie at this point is back to kind of her catatonic shutdown state. She lost her family, and now she's been presumably raped and beat and stuff by these fur trader guys. And the next morning,
this kind of leads into everything that really starts to change. The rain falls down to the camp. It's all pouring rain. They all get set up in their tents and everything. And Wills is chained up behind a tree. And Jesse Plemons' character, Kidler, goes and talks to him, and he's like,
well, when they're chaining him up, Blocker tells him, he's like, Wills is complaining. He's like, I'm gonna drown out here because it's raining, and
right, exactly,
worse than the animals, kind of stuff. And Blocker's like, all right, well, give him some coffee when it lets up. When it starts kind of letting up, you can give him some coffee or whatever. And then Blocker goes, and you can tell he's working on getting in because he's given Rosalie his tent, right? I mean, the gentleman that he is, but it is monsooning, like total rainstorm out, and he kind of pokes his head in the tent, like, hey, everything, how are you doing in here? Is everything okay? And right away, she sees him just soaked out, and she's like, by the way, what are you doing for sleep? He's like, oh, I'll have one of the boys set me up a saddle or whatever out here, and I'll crash outside your tent. She's like, oh, don't be ridiculous,
By the way,
get on in here.
Maybe dirty mind. I thought, here we go. I when that happened, I thought when she was going to let him in, I was like, oh shit,
hookup time.
But yeah,
but they get distracted, and who knows? And that might have been where we were going. But before Bale can get into the tent, Metz comes up to him, and he tells him, man, look, I got to move on. I don't feel anything. He's going into his, he's just seen the brutal parts of war, and he's had enough, and it's broken Metz. And he basically tells Joe, he's like, you've been a good friend. Joe doesn't really say anything. Again, that's one of those sort of, more kind of imagery and stuff than dialogue driven, but Metz kind of says his piece and goes to bed, and Blocker goes back and lays down with Rosalie. Now they're hanging out in their tents. Well, the rain lets up a bit, and Kidder goes to bring Wills some coffee.
Yeah, no, was this it might have happened before the Kidler and Wills incident with the coffee and the tree and stuff. And then Metz, I think before that, I can't remember.
He heads over to Yellow Hawk?
Yes, his tent. Yeah. Was that beforehand? I can't.
Yeah, it was right after when he was when he had that conversation with Blocker, and he tells him, you've been a good friend, Joe. He walks over to Chief Yellow Hawk's tent, and he's got some great lines there too, because he's like, our treatment of the natives cannot be forgiven. Please accept this tobacco. And he hands him like a rolled cigar kind of deal, and he asks him, have mercy on us. And you can tell the emotion and the sincerity in Metz's voice. He knows that what he has done and what they had all done was pretty brutal. And Chief Yellow Hawk kind of acknowledges him, gives him sort of a nod, and we all go to bed, and until we're abruptly awakened because Wills gets the drop on Kidder. He plays sick. He does a little, I'm coughing, and Kidder in an attempt to help him. But he had his gun on him while he's doing it. He knew that it was a potential situation. But Wills grabs him. They go to the ground. They start fighting. Wills comes away with the gun and blows away Kidder. Kidder's toast. And Wills tears off. Everybody, that's when they started fighting, because again, that struggle lasted for pretty long. Now I get that it's raining and thundering and stuff, but it's like, couldn't you yell, Kidder? Yell for help, please. That way, that's how about you yell for your captain and all the people in the tents right around you, instead of just struggling and quiet with this Wills dude. But so Kidder, and because he doesn't speak up, gets blown away, and Wills tears off into the woods. While he's on his way out, Blocker does hit him, and he shoots him.
Yeah.
And he says, he's like, I got him. He's going to bleed out. There's no point even going after him. But Metz hops on his horse and tears after him anyways. And
I thought the bleed out part was about Kidder, because I thought like they were going to try to save him, but he's like, no, he'll bleed out within a day. I thought they're talking about.
No, I think it was Will's. That's why it was like why they didn't even go after him. He's like, no, I got him. He's going to bleed out.
Except for one guy.
But Metz goes after him. No, and everybody else just kind of goes to bed after yelling for Metz. They're like, it's no use. Metz is on a mission. But so they all go back to bed and then wake up the next morning and head on about their way. And again, not too long down the road, they catch up with Metz. And Metz had finally moved on. He caught up to Will's, took care of him. He got him good. And then he put the gun to his own head and took himself out. And obviously another emotional scene for Blocker. He one of the most, he had that tearful goodbye with Woodson, but this one, really got to him. And you can see that. And I think that Thomas asked, he was going to bury Wills, and Blocker's like, no, don't. So I don't even believe they buried Wills. They just let him lay there because,
Yeah. Yeah, that was a culmination of everything throughout the movie from the beginning, from one of the early scenes where they're sitting at the table and he's talking about his melancholia, all the way to, talking about how many men he's killed and children and women. And it was just a culmination at the end where he just could not take it anymore. And once he did the job of taking out Wills, he ended himself. And, Blocker stumbling upon that area with his group, just pure devastation across his face. Obviously, they were, we talked about before, they were more than just partners or, whatever, fellow soldiers. They were like friends,
like
good
blood
friends,
brothers kind of a deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Brothers in arms for sure.
Yep.
But so Metz is laid to rest. And then that pretty much brings us to like the next night or whatever, because then like the next note that I have is cuddle time. Now Rosalie and Blocker are laying back to back in their tent as they were kind of the nights before and stuff. But
did you think though at all that they were gonna maybe
No, I honestly didn't.
No?
Like, and if they did or if they would, it would have been an off-camera kind of a thing, or like kind of alluded to later, which may have kind of been in this. I don't know how far they took it, but Rosalie does turn around and kind of becomes the big spoon for a minute, kind of throws her arm over Blocker. He turns around too, and now we're laying face to face, and they do have the little kind of they touch foreheads, and they just kind of have that kind of connection, because now the roles have kind of reversed, where Blocker was kind of consoling her and taking care of her and her grief and pain. Now she was with him, so they both kind of shared loss, and they have a conversation where Rosalie says, sometimes I envy the finality of death, the certainty, and I have to drive those thoughts away when I'm weak. We'll never get used to the Lord's rough ways, Joseph. So she knows, like life ain't easy and it ain't always fair, and you'll never get used to that part of life.
Well, especially for both of them too, because their lives had just been so brutal to that point. Which, I mean, back in that time period in real life, I'm sure everything was day by day for most people, which is just, you talked about this earlier in the video here, that we have it just easy compared to
we have it good. I don't know what the life expectancy was in 1892.
A day.
But it couldn't have been and the quality of life was rough. I mean, we do, see, again, like I said, that I can see both the good, the positive and the negative in that sort of an existence. But the West was rough, man. Like this country was formed during that time, and like conquest and war and battle is a part of every country and every civilization's history. And it's, obviously the American Indian Wars are no exception, and it was a brutal, rough time. And, but it is what it is. And now we have America. So this is 4th of July weekend, by the way, as we're recording this. So God bless America. But We also then get a little exchange between Little Bear and Blocker. Well, Blocker's reading his book around the fire. He kind of notices Little Bear checking him out, and he offers him the book. He kind of holds it up to him, and Little Bear kind of shakes it off, but he does give him a smile, and they hold on, where are we now? Then we got a little Yellowhawk to Rosalie. They're talking by the fire there, and Yellowhawk leans over to her and is like thanking her for her kindness and her spirit. And he says, "You within me, me within you." Like they've had their little connection, and she has, been nice to the family and all that after the initial reaction of meeting them. She's definitely come a long way. But so that then brings us to Montana. Like we've reached Montana, well on our way to the Valley of the Bears. And Rosalie asks Blocker if Yellowhawk's even going to make it. He's rough. I mean, we haven't spent a whole lot of time on it, like in the movie, focusing on that. But we do know that his time is pretty much up. He's that close to the end. And
well, ever
Blocker
since they went
says,
to Fort Winslow and he was coughing hard in that cell, and
right,
it just got progressively worse and worse. And now
he's
like,
able
okay,
to kind of like turn it off and jump in when he needed to and stuff.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
no, he's pretty
the
much
end.
gone. And Blocker says, he's taking his last breath. So
Yep.
he knows. And they're kind of sitting on like a hill, kind of overlooking Montana. And Blocker goes over and starts talking to Yellowhawk, about like we're close to your homeland. We're getting there. And he goes off on his little list. Blocker starts telling Yellowhawk of all the friends that Yellowhawk took out. He goes through his whole list. I had a friend, whatever, and names. I had a friend, dude, and just goes down this list of all these people Yellowhawk took out, and he ends it with, "I lost many friends, and you have lost many as well." And Yellowhawk responds, "They are a great loss for us both, but we know death comes to us all." So Blocker then shakes his hand and extends a hand and shakes his hand and tells him, "Don't look back, my friend. Go in a good way. A part of me dies with you." And so
final like culmination of them both recognizing that they each have done each other wrong, and their men have each done each other wrong. And it's kind of like, let's put it behind us. Blocker's like, you're a dying man, and like he said, go in a good way. And they kind of put their history in a sense, officially behind them.
And that's, go in a good way. Don't look back, my friend. A part of me dies with you. So they've obviously been through a lot on this journey together. It's brought them close, and different people, from when they kind of took off, and they reach the Valley of the Bears. They're there, and Elk Woman or Little Living Woman, I'm not sure which one, says, and that's totally racist, isn't it? I should be able to tell, but then neither of them had a whole lot of screen time. We should do a thing. No. You take a shot every time you hear the words screen time if you're watching this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. There you go. So what, 2 shots now, maybe?
Yep, you're right. You should be at 2 shots. Well, actually, we introed it too, though. So like we're at like 3 or 4 now. You should be good and toasty at this point. But one of them says, we're home, and Yellowhawk says, it never looked so beautiful. So we've made it to the Valley of the Bears, and you could tell Yellowhawk was just hanging on by a thread, because seemingly almost as soon as they set foot on the Valley of the Bears, he's gone. He dies, and he becomes one with the Force and gets a very Jedi-like burial. And they have him up on like a platform they built, and they do a little ceremony, and they're laying him to rest. They're putting him in the ground with a bunch of stones and giving him like a traditional burial. And then we meet the locals.
Yeah, just when you think that, like, I thought, okay, we're kind of towards the end here. They're doing the burial, and it's like, all right, there's not going to be any more, bang, bang, shoot scenes, and it's going to get more. No, it got intense in this scene pretty quickly.
Cyrus Lound and his boys.
Yes.
And he owns that property there, and he clearly does not like the native people, refers to them as savages routinely, and, is this here's my land, and I want you off of it. To which Blocker says, "Oh, hey, but, I don't think you understand. I have these papers from the president. As if that's
You
going to
nailed it. You said it
matter.
earlier where it just does not matter.
Worthless.
Worthless.
Worthless
It's
papers.
worthless. Yeah.
Cyrus looks at him and says, there ain't no writing on no paper, president or not, can tell me what I can and can't do on my property. He's not having it. Rosalie grabs a rifle. She's like,
yep.
I mean, she sees the threat. They all kind of see the threat. Next thing you know, guns are drawn, and we're still kind of having a discussion though. But Cyrus says to Blocker, you just ain't hearing me. To which Blocker grabs his revolver and responds back, you just ain't hearing me. We have this kind of classic stand down sort of scene. And
maybe Cyrus, he recognizes too. I feel like Blocker had the look that entire time of like, I don't want to do this. Come on.
Oh yeah, for sure. When he went to grab his gun, it was sort of like, oh, here we go again. And also of note, by the way, Cyrus, played by Herschel from The Walking Dead. I can't remember his real name, but he plays Herschel in The Walking Dead. But so they have their little exchange. Herschel, that's what I'm going to call him. No, Cyrus tells him, that savage stays here. You better make room for several more right next to him. He wanted the body off his land, and if he's going to stay here, you're all going to join him. And Blocker responds, well, he ain't moving. And everybody's got their guns drawn, pointed at each other. Rosalie's got the rifle on Cyrus, the leader of the little group there, and Cyrus tells her, something tells me you ain't got the nerve to fire that woman. Bang! She, second later, she proved him wrong and pulls the trigger, and gunfire. We were in another gun battle. Elk Woman's hit. Thomas is hit. Blackhawk hit. Blocker hit. We're getting hit, but we're taking out Cyrus and his boys as well. But Blackhawk, Yellowhawk's son, gets tagged a couple of times, and you can tell right there, I was like, oh, Blackhawk's gone. Living Woman also just gets iced. I believe Elk Woman was dead right at the beginning when she was hit. Yeah. So we're basically left with Blocker, Rosalie, and Little Bear at this point. And
that's all you got, man.
That's all we got. And the gunfire stops eventually. Blocker runs down the last remaining survivor with a knife and goes kind of personal with it, and ends it with the knife. And then we got another funeral. We got to bury.
Yeah, what's funny in that scene too with Rosalie, she kind of, as she watches Blocker stab the guy and kill the guy and end it. There's parts in this movie where she's like, I can't believe that just happened. In some parts, she's like, I'm gonna fucking shoot you.
Like, my word. Yeah, she's kind of covering Little Bear's eyes and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, after kind of what we've been through, really, this was the line for you. But but that is a very personal way to do it. And I thought when Blocker was walking over, I thought he was gonna go classic and scalp him, which he didn't. He just runs it in his gut. And you can tell though he works it though. He gives her help. But
which Rosalie's husband was scalped, right? In that first scene, I believe.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so we got another funeral. We got to bury Blackhawk, Elk Woman, and Living Woman, along with Yellowhawk. Have our last little kind of moments together, and then boom, we cut to Butte, Montana, at a train station, and they made it all the way. Everyone's kind of now in new clothes, in a suit. Blocker's got like the bowler hat on and a suit, holding the briefcase. And Little Bear also, he's got the braids going, but he's in a nice little suit, vest, all decked out. And Rosalie's got her dress on, and they're about to board a train. Last call for Chicago, and but it's just Little Bear and Rosalie hopping on the train, and we have a brief goodbye, and Rosalie says, well, I guess this is it. And Blocker's like, yeah, it came sooner than I thought, which I kind of laughed, was like, really? Like, it seemed like we've spent a lifetime together now at this point. Yeah. But I mean, because it was a fairly long movie. It wasn't too long, but it was long. But he says that the end kind of came sooner than he thought it would. she tells him that he's a great man, for everything he's done. Obviously, they shared a lot, and she can't, we can't thank you enough type of a deal. Blocker gives Little Bear his book, tells him, here's a gift. It's now your time to put this to use. He says it's Caesar, one of the bravest men I've ever read. And Little Bear accepts and says thank you. But so I got to find, I don't know what book it was, but Caesar, the bravest man he's ever read. So I'm going to look into, find out kind of what that book is.
It's funny leading up to that final part where he hops on the train. I was kind of thinking he's gonna get on the train, right? It's gonna happen.
He's got to get,
what? Yeah.
So Rosalie and Little Bear hop on the train, and she tells Blocker, whatever may come, I want the best for you. And she kind of fakes a smile as they say goodbye, and her and Little Bear go and hop on the train, and Blocker starts walking away, and the train starts pulling out the station, but Blocker stops in his tracks, and who knows what it was or where, but he turns around and he goes and he hops on that train and rides off into the sunset with Rosalie and Little Bear, so.
And that's where it ends.
That's where it ends. And it's, a kind of a happy ending, but a bittersweet kind of deal because, all of their lives are just kind of crazy, but they do have that little kind of unit that they formed together. Yep. And they certainly have a history and an interesting family story now. But so we got a blended family heading on their way to Chicago to start a new life.
Yep. Overall, I kind of have some notes here, what I liked, what I disliked. I'm going to ask you first what you liked most about the movie, then we'll get into some more stuff.
I think the casting really, the everything about it was pretty good. I enjoyed the movie overall, more than I expected to even. It wasn't a perfect movie by any stretch, but I think that, again, Christian Bale, his performance is a standout. The visual aspects of the movie, the landscapes and stuff like that were the second star as far as I'm concerned.
All right, and then we'll get into your
soundtrack
dislikes.
Was good too. The sound design of the film.
Yeah, it was. It worked perfectly for it. The score of the movie was perfect. What was your dislikes?
Not a whole lot there. Again, it was a little bit long, but not too long. I wasn't really kind of aware of it, but it did get kind of long. But my biggest criticism would be a lot of it was predictable. I knew where it was all headed before it got there, but I was kind of fine with it to just kind of go along and be there for the ride. I wasn't looking for a movie to blow my mind or anything, but it was a little predictable, a little long.
Yeah,
that's about it
for sure. So what's the final score you're giving this thing out of 10?
I'm going out of 7. Like I said, I'm going to do that scale. I don't give a shit what you do. You can name them out of 10 all you want, but I would give this I'd say a 5 out of 7. Now, in the meme 5 out of 7, the kid was implying that Fight Club was a perfect movie, a perfect 5 out of 7. I would say a 7 out of 7 is perfect. So I'll give it a 5 out of 7. I enjoyed it. I did like it. It was a good Western. If you're into those type of movies, I think you would enjoy this one.
Yeah, for what I liked, I put acting was phenomenal. It was. Yeah. Christian Bale was so good. Wes Studi was fucking awesome as Yellow Hawk.
Yep. What else is he in? Do you know anything else that he was in off the top of your head or no?
Man, he's one of those guys where it's he's been in so many movies, but he did a great job. Rosamund Pike, I thought, did an awesome job. I think maybe my second favorite movie of hers that she's done. The ending was somewhat, like we talked about, somewhat predictable because at first it's oh wait, maybe he's not gonna get on the train, and then he ends up getting on the train, so it's okay, I kind of saw that coming. But the sights also wrote down were really good, which we talked about. It was a beautiful setting, looked really cool. But I did have a couple dislikes, nothing too big. You didn't get a lot of backstory with some of the
characters. A lot of that was kind of one of the criticisms I forgot was very little character development in some of the kind of secondary characters. That's why, like I said, I kind of joked about not being able to really distinguish Little Woman or Living Woman. I always keep wanting to call her Little Woman. It's Little Bear, Living Woman and Elk Woman. But they were just throwaway characters. I don't really know who they were or what they were about. They were just accompanying the men. Kind of, we know more about
Right.
Black Hawk and Yellow Hawk than we do of them. Even Little Bear, like I said, we got more interaction with him and Blocker than we did with the women. So the native women were just names on an IMDb sheet, and then even some of Blocker's crew, could have got kind of deeper into, like I had mentioned to you when we were talking about it before. Tommy Thomas, when the first time I watched it, I mean, he just kind of came out of nowhere after when Metz goes after Wills and kills him, and then they come upon him later. All of a sudden, I was like, wait, who is this guy? Like, forgot he was even there. They met him briefly before they were about to head out from Winslow. And then other than that, he really didn't have a whole lot of interaction at all. So then all of a sudden when he's like a kind of a speaking role and like involved in the scene, I'm like, wait a minute, where did this guy come from? But so Tommy Thomas didn't get a whole lot of development. The native women, yeah, you're absolutely right on that. That was, but it, it was a long movie, and they did emphasize more of the kind of the visual aspect of the storytelling than the dialogue. So
a little lack of character development, but not their backstory, but nothing too big. And then rewatchability is kind of a thing we talked about too. Rewatchability. The first time I watched it, I was into it. I liked it. The second time through was more of a chore, and I guess because maybe I had to take notes and kind of really dive into it and mark down everything that was important. The second time, I kind of got bored. I for sure got bored. Overall, though, I would say it's a good movie. Final score out of 10, I would give it 7.8. I think it's good, like just above good, but not great or not like one of the best movies, obviously, that I've seen.
Yeah, it's just it's a decent movie. Yeah, I agree. And even you're right with the rewatchability. Would I rewatch it again? Sure. Will I? Probably not. I mean, like I wouldn't not watch it again, but I'm not going to like make it a point to see this movie again.
No.
If it comes on cable someday when I'm flipping through channels and bored, I might leave it there. I don't know. But it's not it's not going to end up like in my playlist as a repeat viewing kind of movie.
Well, dude, we did it. Our first
Hostiles
review. Hostiles in the book. We both liked it, right?
Yeah.
Overall,
I recommend it to people. If you like Westerns, definitely check out that movie. If you like Christian Bale, definitely check out that movie. If you like, just kind of moody kind of visual storytelling, check out that movie. I would recommend that movie.
Guys, please subscribe, spread the word about our channel. Comment if you have any TV suggestions or movie suggestions. We'll take any suggestions that you'll give us. And we're on Facebook, Brandon, as well. What's the Facebook name there?
Screen Time. Search Screen Time on Facebook. Perfect. You can find us. And movies and TV review. Do we tease what we got coming up next? I mean, we do got a couple things like in the chamber that are going to happen after this. Well, so as the title of our show suggests, it's not just movies. We're also going to be talking TV shows. And up first will be season 1.
Top 10 porn scenes. Oh, sorry.
No. Season 1 of Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Crazy show. I've seen it before. Travis has not. So it's going to be an interesting discussion if you're familiar at all with David Lynch and Twin Peaks. I'm sure you'll be looking forward to watching Travis's reaction. But so Twin Peaks coming up next. And then we do have another movie in the holster as well that we're going to do. It's a controversial movie that just recently came out called The Hunt. It was effectively canceled from a wide theater release because it depicts essentially liberals hunting and murdering conservatives. And the kind of the conservative crowd seemed to be the one that jumped on it and kind of brought the whole cancel culture thing to a head and was successful in getting it at least halted. It was delayed for a long time. It didn't come. I don't know if it ever came out in theaters. I don't think it did. I think it just was a straight to a home video kind of release kind of thing. But I've seen it. Have you seen it yet? You haven't watched The Hunt?
No, I'm looking forward to it though. It looks really good.
Yeah, I liked it. And again, I wouldn't have watched it had I not listened to Ethan Suplee, who is in it, talking about the movie, and that he's like, the whole perception of the thing was wrong. Like people got it wrong, and he was like, it's unfortunate because it's a good movie and it's not what everybody thinks it is. And I'm a big fan of his. I was like, well, one, if he's in it, I'm interested. And then two, if what he says is true, then, like, I mean, I should see this movie at least, if not just to make my own opinion as to whether it was like offensive or too far or whatever, stuff like that. So I was like, no, I'm not going to let people tell me that I shouldn't watch this movie or that this movie is a
and we're
bad
both kind of
movie.
the same mindset where it'd be pretty hard to like really offend us. I mean, it's not,
Right.
we're
I
not
could
gonna be
see
one of those,
myself not liking stuff or whatever, but
right,
as far as like
exactly, yeah.
being offended by it so much so as to stop it from happening and letting other people enjoy it, no, that's not my thing. And we'll we'll get into that a bit, I'm sure, when we talk about The Hunt. But so we're releasing a new video every Tuesday. So next Tuesday, look for episode 1, season 1 of Twin Peaks, followed by the next Tuesday with The Hunt. And yeah, follow us on Screen Time at Facebook, and we're also screen_time_pod_. There might be an underscore at the end of that
No
on
underscore
Twitter.
after it.
No underscore after that on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then we're also
and
on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. You can find Screen Time Podcast.
Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a lot of fun doing this. First episode of the Twin Peaks review, Tuesday, 3 o'clock Central. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it, all right? Have a good one, guys. Thank you so much.